All right, welcome back to another season of Behind the Point Spread. We are back for year number 3 as we take a look at some of the top college football games coming up in week number 1. And for some teams, it's going to be week number 2. I'm Travis Justice from Doc Talk Sports. And guess what? If you missed the latest Doc Talk podcast where Dr. Rob and I preview the UTEP game for Nebraska, check it out. You can find it on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and, of course, on our YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube right now, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We want you to subscribe to our channel, become one of our regular content viewers, and we'll have a little bit of fun together. That way you know when you subscribe when we have something new coming out each and every week. You know, our cast of characters has not changed this year. Let's bring everybody back in. Down in the bottom left, that's our Vegas insider, a longtime friend of mine, I think over 20 years now, Mr. Scott Spreitzer. And look at Scott. Dr. Rob's already starting shit. Can you believe this? Instead of putting his name, he goes 95 O-line. We're back up to 94. Good evening, Dr. Rob.
You got to have a little fun with this stuff. Come on.
Well, during the podcast, you wore the goat shirt with the 94 goats and all the numbers across. You're throwing shade already, and the season hasn't even started.
Dropping truth bombs.
All right, Scott, you were around. You were betting on the Huskers back in 94, 95. Better offensive line, 94 or 95?
Ooh, man, I'm going to go with 94.
See, good man. Good man.
It took me a second there. I'm getting old. Okay. I had to recall.
Here's the thing, though. I joke about this a lot. The 95 team was absolutely freaking amazing. And, when you look at them on paper, statistically, it's a head-scratcher how good they were. You got a team that averaged – my brother John had this calculated out at once where I think he'd said if they'd kept the starters in for like 3 more plays and they'd gained an additional like 48 yards rushing in the last regular season game of 95, they would have averaged 400 yards rushing a game. Whew. And instead they only averaged, I think it was like 399.8 yards rushing a game.
Only 399.8.
But they basically averaged 400 yards rushing per game.
Now,
and that was a team that actually did throw the ball.
Look at that. David says you're not wrong, though, Rob. David is a
smart man.
And I'm already 1-0.
How about our good buddy Jason
I
Warner?
said 94.
Yep,
there we go.
Jason Warner, one of our beer suppliers, says, "Awesome name, Rob." So you're getting
my
lots
wife and
of love already.
My wife literally, I had beer. We're redoing our kitchen right now, and so we literally had cases of beer stacked on the counter behind me. And so my wife was like, "Hey, I knew you were doing the Behind the Point Spread tonight." So I had to clear all of Jason's beer off. And so she's got it like reorganized in our storeroom. So we've got like this cool storeroom that we got everything in. So we've got like this whole stash of beer in there now from Jason.
Scott's the only one that's still in his regular studio. Rob's in his basement, and that's where you're normally. I'm in the kitchen.
I usually do it, yeah.
Yeah,
I got the football helmets behind me, and
I'm in the kitchen because, Scott, I don't know if you heard, but I had a massive flood in my basement first part of May, destroyed everything. And
Trav's redoing his house too.
Yes. But one of our main water pipes, it wasn't even rain. I had a water pipe bust, and I went downstairs to do my radio show in the morning. There was about 10 inches of water throughout the entire basement, and it was nasty.
I remember when that happened. Such a great studio too. I'm sure it'll be back sooner than later. But the important question: did you save the beer? That's what I want to know.
Oh, the beer is saved, and we actually, when the studio gets done, and Rob has seen this, we actually have a new beer fridge that's going to go in the studio. So we're going to have our own little personal beer fridge when we get this thing done. Nice. So I learned something tonight. Before we get into the games, I learned something tonight. Elon Musk wants his money. Rob, we used to be able to do this live. So we're live on Facebook right now. We're live on YouTube. We're live on LinkedIn. Believe it or not, we actually get a lot of LinkedIn viewers, which I think is pretty cool. We used to be able to go live on Twitter. So I hit the go live button, and it says I have to have a premium account to go live on Twitter. So yeah, you need to get the little blue check mark. You need to spend like $8 a month, just to let you know. Either that or I'll do it for you. Okay.
Should I
Can we
be
write
ashamed
that
I
off?
spend $8 a month?
I think
Elon.
cover the $8 a month. I could be wrong, but he's a cheap ass. Just to let everybody know.
I mean, that's like $96. I don't know.
What?
Part of me, it's a matter of principle, but
All right, let's dive into what we're going to be doing tonight. We are going to be taking a look at 4 college football games taking place this weekend, and what a first week of the season, really, if you think about it. I mean, you got Georgia taking on Clemson. You've got Penn State, West Virginia, which I think is a really intriguing game. We'll get Scott's input on that. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Big first game for a new head coach at Texas A&M. Big first game for former Nebraska Athletic Director Trev Alberts, who's now leading the Aggie program. And, of course, we will wrap up with the Nebraska and UTEP game. If you want to work with Scott Spreitzer all season long, do this. Text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get a free $60 trial of premium member picks from Scott. Again, that's the number 29022. And the code word is Doc Talk, or you can just visit docsports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left hand of the website. Good thing is this is an interactive show if you want it to be. Owen, our producer, my son, is screening the phone calls right now. If you have a question for Dr. Rob, if you have a question for Scott Spreitzer, 402-543-5556. Again, the number 543-5556. And if you don't want to call, you can also use the chat button, I believe, in Facebook and the YouTube as well. So you can leave comments in there, and stuff is coming in already. You guys have we've kicked off the season last week, but Scott, how excited are you? Do you, from a betting perspective? I know you do baseball, you bet year round, but is there something? And you're big in the NFL, but is there something special about college football that really kind of gets you moving and grooving?
Still my favorite thing, man. I mean, after all these years, and college football is the thing for me. And I'm a fan of the NFL more than I've ever been in the NFL over the last few years. But college football gets it going, and it's still the pomp and circumstance. It's still a situation of, you can't go out there and lose 5 games and end up in the Super Bowl. So, again, growing up in Nebraska, it'd be tough not to be a college football fan, because I grew up in the heyday. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, moved out to Vegas in the mid 80s, and still, of course, followed Nebraska. I can remember going to work when I was working retail, and I just started going to college at UNLV, came out to Las Vegas at the ripe old age of 17 out of high school, and Nebraska loses to Syracuse. I think that was September of 84. And at the time, Syracuse was a downtrodden program. And I couldn't believe I had to go to work when Nebraska just lost to Syracuse. And I walk in the store, and I'm in Las Vegas, and I got to do this job in between going to school. And I'm pissed off that nobody's upset that Nebraska lost to Syracuse. They didn't even know they played.
Okay,
man.
so I got a story about that game. And this was a story. So Milt Tenneper, the old O-line coach at Nebraska that I played for, he told us a story that he said in the opening kickoff of that game, which, Game Dog here with the comments said basically made their program. He's right.
Yeah.
In the opening kickoff, one of the Syracuse players, so Tom Rathman was on that 84 Nebraska team. One of the Syracuse players, Tom Rathman, was on he was on the offense, but he was on every special teams because he was that guy who would light dudes up.
Sure.
One of the Syracuse players came down on the kickoff team, came downfield on the opening kickoff and knocked Tom Rathman out of the game. Knocked him out cold. Yeah. And Tenneper said the entire Nebraska sideline sees basically the toughest dude on their team, the biggest, baddest guy is. I mean, Rathman was an absolute badass. Mm-hmm. They saw him get knocked out of the game on the opening kickoff, and they said it completely killed Nebraska. Yeah. He said that one play, watching that one guy watching their one dude get completely lit up like that, just completely took the air out of the sails. And Tenneper said if that doesn't happen, Nebraska wins the game. 10%. He said it was basically a one-play football game, and that was the one play.
And that started in almost intimidation, right? I mean, you're like, oh my God, they just knocked Tom Rathman out of the game, and the intimidation started. Will there be any intimidation in Athens, Georgia this weekend? Clemson at Georgia. What an opener. Two storied programs, national championship programs, Saturday at 11 o'clock on ABC. Georgia, 13.5-point favorite at home. The over at 48.5, Scott.
Listen, man, I'm not as old as my hair pretends to be. So I'm setting up something that I'm going to say here. And you guys get it from a different perspective. I mean, I'm half bald. It's all white what's there. And you guys have gone for the aerodynamic look. I get it. I'll be there.
Yeah, I'm not bald. I just shaved my head.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's the aerodynamic look. I'm going to get there naturally soon.
I'm bald. I am bald. Just let everybody know.
Bald. But so I'm setting this up because I don't know about you guys, and I wasn't always a Dabo Swinney fan. If I don't have action against Clemson, I actually root for him now because I miss old school style football in that he's loyal to his players. They do have nil money. Everybody thinks about, he doesn't go through the transfer portal. Well, they still pay their kids the nil money, and he pays the kids that he recruits out of high school for the most part, and he's loyal to them, and he's about developing great high school players into really good college football players. I dig that, guys. I know it might sound like, the guy who's out on his front lawn, the old man swinging his fist at the clouds. But the bottom line is I do dig that. Now, in this particular game, I don't believe they're going to win outright. And I do believe he's going to have to make some changes if he wants to be a national title contender again on a yearly basis. I couldn't lay the points here with the Georgia Bulldogs. They've lost a lot from last year, and I'm not so sure that they're going to be able to find exactly what they need on offense to pull away from Clemson in this game. As far as Clemson, you got, same quarterback back from last year. They were 130th in explosive offensive plays in the entire nation. So they're going to run the football. They're going to try to get it done that way a little bit with some dink and dunk and maybe try to stretch a little bit. As far as Georgia's concerned, I think we're going to see them struggle with that offensive line. And I mean, struggle relatively speaking to Georgia and teams of the recent past at Georgia. I think we're going to see a lower scoring game here. And I'm not usually one that sees a marquee matchup and says, wow, 48.5, and I'm playing the under, because it always seems like it's 14-7 at the end of one quarter off of two defensive touchdowns by two extremely talented defenders and a punt return. But the bottom line is I think these two teams are going to play a lower scoring game. I think both teams are going to eat the clock. I think the defenses are going to be the dominant force in this game for both teams. And I think it probably lands in the low 40s by the time it's said and done.
Is this a game you're going to touch?
I haven't yet. I may. I kind of like to get it up a little bit more if it gets there, and I'm going to wait around. There's no reason for me right now, I think, to jump in. Two of the games we're talking about, I already have action in, so I'll tell you those. But I did want to talk about this one just because it's such a big game opening weekend and give you my thoughts. I don't think Georgia is going to win the national title. Ohio State's by the way, I wanted to mention that because we're not talking about the Buckeyes game this week. One of the sportsbook directors with BetMGM, which is a guy by the name of Seamus McGee, he had said a few days ago he's never seen anything like it, the amount of money that's coming in on one team to go over their wins total, to win their conference, to make it to the playoffs, and to win the national championship, as he sees on the $20 million payroll Ohio State Buckeyes. And to me, that's almost the kiss of death. So if you're a Buckeye hater, you got something to work with there. I don't think Georgia's going to win the title either.
I got to put this up there because Eric's paying money to have this up there, believe it or not. That's what you get with those power ones. Liberty at minus 35.5. And I know this isn't on your thing, but when you pay to have a comment on, I got to put it on there against Campbell. I'm reading that Liberty's offense is supposed to be really good. Thoughts if you've looked at the Campbell and Liberty game?
Is that still the Campbell Camels?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So, you start talking about laying 5 touchdowns with, I guess you could say group of 5 teams. I get a little bit scared, a little bit nervous. We saw last week, for instance, Hawaii, a 40-point favorite over Delaware State, and they're only leading by 7 going into the fourth quarter. So I get a little nervous about doing that. Now, his reasoning of Liberty's going to have a good offense. Yeah, Liberty's going to be pretty good on offense again, missing some parts from last year that helped get that team where it was. Good luck. I hope you win. I won't be on the game. I won't be on either side. So there you have it. Hate to be a wimp and wuss out like that, but I just got to be honest with my bets here.
Going back to your Ohio State comment, that's the reason Ryan Day is on the hot seat. I mean,
Yes.
think about it. Ryan Day is on the hot seat. He's a great coach, but they expect big things. And if he doesn't win a national title, I wouldn't be shocked if they made some kind of change at Ohio State just because they have really, really high expectations, which is even crazy to think about. All right, game number 2, we're going down to College Station, Texas. By the way, this was going to upset Husker fans out there, but it's still my favorite place ever to watch a game. The times at Nebraska, when I was covering Nebraska and I got to go to College Station, there's just something really special about that place, from the band, from the tradition. It's a great place to watch a college football game. And I got to believe this one is going to be insane. Saturday night at 6:30 on ABC. The Aggies a 3-point favorite, over under at 46.5.
There you have it. Travis is a Trev Alberts fan.
Oh, that's true.
Listen, I've been friends with Trev for a long time. I'm not going to hold the animosity that
you're a friend.
Fans are. You're friends with Trev Alberts. You played with him. You like him.
Well, that is true.
Okay.
No bodyguards. I see like nobody behind you watching your back. And you are in Omaha. Anyway, listen, this line was 2.5 at a lot of shops yesterday, so it's gone up 0.5 point. And this has a lot to do with Notre Dame's offense and the problems up front going into this game. They talk about the fact that, Notre Dame goes into this contest really banged up on the front line. And I don't know that they're going to be able to move the ball consistently against this Texas A&M team. That's the scary part when you're looking at Notre Dame. As far as A&M is concerned, there's Action Network put out this article, and I thought it was really interesting. So Texas A&M's over-under wins total for this season is 8.5. And you got to pay $1.45 if you like the over. So you got to pay $14.50 to win 10 for those that are new to this game. And so they wrote an article about the fact that going back to 2010, A&M is 6-0-1 to the under when their wins total sits at 8 wins or more. So they've been expected several times over the last 13, 14 seasons to win a lot of football games. And when they're expected to do so, they have not. They don't. So if that matters to anybody out there, that's just an interesting stat that I wanted to bring up. But the best part about the Aggies to start the season is that defensive front. And the fact that they got after quarterbacks last season, and I think they'll continue to do so at least as good as last year, this year. I mentioned Notre Dame's offensive line. What do they have now? They've got like 5 guys that have a shared, it's ridiculous, like 6 games between them. They lose one of their starters up front in fall camp. And I think that's going to be tough in this particular game. I know A&M has a lot of offensive line new faces too. So I think this is another underplay. And guys, when I started hearing about the problems with the Irish offensive line, I jumped in on Texas A&M minus 2.5. And if we talked about 40 games this week, you would hear me game after game after game saying, I cannot bet on this team. I mean, either on the other side or not playing the game because they've got nothing coming back up front on the offensive line, or a center or a left tackle got injured in fall camp and is now out. So it's so important to me in weeks 1 and 2 when it comes to college football. So I like A&M at 2.5, 3. I wouldn't go higher than 3. I think it stays under the total.
Don't forget, you can always give us a call if you have a question for Scott or Dr. Rob, 402-543-5556. That's 402-543-5556. Any change with Elko coming to Texas A&M offensively?
You're talking to me?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I like Elko up front. You're asking if he's going to change his game plan at all?
No, I'm just saying that you got a first-year coach. Anything to worry about just with a first-year coach type situation?
Always concerned about that because you got to get used to that new room. But I like the change in their offensive play calling over what we've seen in the past several years out of A&M. There's been too many times for me when I thought A&M should have been better than they are when they've lost games they should not have. I do like this head coaching hire. I think it's a definitely good hire.
Before we dive into our next games, I got a little tidbit to throw at you. A 1-game advantage. Scott's giving this little tidbit, and the teams making their season debut are 60-34 against the spread, not counting the COVID year, against teams that have already played 1 game already. So, Scott, like Georgia Tech and Florida State played last week. New Mexico played last week. Nevada played last week. Conventional wisdom would have told me, and you hear coaches say it all the time, you make more progress in week 2 from week 1 but that's not always the case against teams that are making their debut.
Against the spread, it's really the opposite. And going back several years now, if you play that team making their season debut, you are 60-34 against the spread. That would be week 1 and week 2 in college football. One team's already got a game under their belt and the other team does not. And I think it becomes more important nowadays with the transfer portal and a lot of new players every year coming into the mix because, and of course, with new coaches, jumping into the mix, they've got film on the other guy. Like Nevada and Troy, you got a couple of the new head coaches, a couple of the new coaching staffs. One guy's got film on what you're doing. They just played SMU, Nevada did last week. The other guy doesn't have film on what the new coaching staff's doing at Troy. They can go back and look and see what they did at their previous school. I think that's an advantage. So it's been one of those situations where there's been overreactions to what happens with that team that had a game under their belt already. Perfect example, and I've jumped in on this one, back to the Nevada game against Troy. Troy was as high as 16 6 weeks ago. They were as high as 15 a few weeks ago. They were 13.5 going into this last weekend. They're now 9 off of Nevada almost beating SMU outright. It's a touchdown change, or adjustment. And I watched the Nevada game. I didn't play the game last week, but I wanted to see what they were going to look like for going in and playing Troy. I love the hire of Choate, the head coach at Nevada. He's all about microwaving the program, not rebuilding. I like that kind of attitude and style with the transfer portal in the mix. That team, listen, they were outgained like 408 to 298 by SMU, by more than 1.1 yards per play by the end of the game. When SMU stopped making dumb mistakes, they outscored Nevada 16-0 down the stretch and won the game. Didn't come close to covering, but they won the game. So they're a little bit overvalued this week. That number's dropped just 4 points off of last week's Nevada game against SMU. And I like Troy a lot this year, guys. I think they're going to make a lot of noise with an up-tempo offense. I also am not crazy about the Nevada quarterback. So there's just an example of what I look at and why these teams that played a game, when it comes to the spread and betting, aren't nearly as successful as you would assume. Tom Osborne used to always say, I remember when I was growing up there, the biggest improvement we make from week 1 to in the entire season is from week 1 to week 2. I used to, I recall him saying that a lot, not against the spread. And, there's 5 games out there. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. Georgia State is at Georgia Tech. Tech's 21.5, only came down a point there. BC is at Florida State on Monday. Florida State has gone from like 18 all the way down to 15.5. I mentioned Troy and Nevada. UCLA and Hawaii. This is another game. Hawaii played Delaware State. I mentioned that earlier. UCLA is a 14-point favorite, only up a point. Here's the funny thing about that. When Deshaun Foster had the Big Ten Media Day and got up and spoke and just had a brain freeze, I thought it was crazy, but the immediate reaction in Las Vegas saw the number for UCLA drop from 13.5 down to 11. Like one bad speech had decided for a lot of people to run out and make a bet. Well, now UCLA is 14, and then Arizona's 31 over New Mexico. New Mexico, of course, last week lost to Montana State.
Let me see if you agree with this. I'm going to cover you up a little bit, but Game Dog says no two-a-days, minimal hitting, portal. The days of teams making their best programs from game 1 to game 2 are long over in modern college football. Same with the NFL. Agree or disagree with that?
I would say ask Rob on that one. This system or this trend that I told you goes back about 15 to 16 years. So it's not like it just started when we started hitting the transfer portal. But again, you do see less hitting in practice, I would guess, in probably 75% of the programs compared to when Rob was playing, as far as spring. And I remember Frost didn't even, I don't think he allowed tackling in spring practice, basically. So that'd be a good question, I think, for Rob, is to see if there's been a big difference because of that, and if they've been able to be prepared for game 2 or make that improvement from game 1.
I still think that you still see that huge improvement. And I mean, a good team's going to still be a good team. A bad team's still going to be a bad team. So but I think you're going to see that. Within the scope of that, I think the most improvement you see within the scope of a given team is still week 1 to week 2.
And I think we got to keep in mind too, we're talking against the spread. We're not talking about straight up win, right? And that's a big difference. We're talking about against the spread.
Yeah. Now, when you're talking against the spread, guess what? The opponent's also improving from week 1 to week 2. So that's why the against the spread's not going to change in that regard.
It's the great equalizer. That's what we
Yeah,
call it.
because
Las Vegas.
it's an equalizing thing. I mean, you're improving week 1 to week 2. The guy you're playing against is improving week 1 to week 2 also. It's I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. It's just the thing you got to keep in mind is the guy you're playing against is also going through that exact same process. So it kind of evens out. And like Scott said, it's a great, that's the equalizer there. But I mean, for most teams, you see a huge jump in when you're looking at within the team drop in turnovers, fewer mistakes, less penalties. Things clean up a lot between week 1 and week 2. Doesn't necessarily mean everybody's all of a sudden good. I mean, the opponent's cleaning everything up also.
And I want to see if DJ Uiagalelei is allowed to throw a pass beyond 5 yards. I mean, my gosh.
Wow,
he starts 9 for 10. Every pass
game.
was 3 yards. I mean, I could almost.
Well, that was a tough game. That was a tough game to watch. So, which the goofy thing there is I had to we went up to Augustana for their first big preseason scrimmage on Saturday. Finish up the scrimmage, and we were watching that game, and I had to tell my wife, hey, the Florida State quarterback, remember when we went to the Clemson Florida State game a couple of years ago? That was the Clemson quarterback at that game. Yep. Then he was the Oregon State quarterback. Now he's the Florida State quarterback. But yeah, that's a kid that you kind of got to cut him loose and just let him go do his thing.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into the next game. This is an interesting one. This is intriguing. West Virginia is much improved. James Franklin has 1,000 lives. The fact of the story about Franklin has just gone away, about him telling medical staff just to clear players to play, and he didn't get any trouble for it, is astonishing to me. Penn State goes to Morgantown, almost heaven, 8.5-point favorite, over under pretty high at 51.5. Thoughts on this, Scott?
Yeah, I jumped on this at 10 and took West Virginia plus the points. It's down to 8.5, but I'm going to tell you why I don't think you should jump off a team like, for instance, getting 10. That's down to 8.5, and you were late, to the party. We went back, myself and another guy who has a 40-year database with all the lines, all the scores, everything else, even from FCS, all that stuff. And we went back earlier this summer, and we wanted to see how often the point spread comes into play on the final score. How many times percentage-wise does the final score land on the point spread or within a point or so of the point spread? And it's less than 2% in college football, which I think would shock people because they always hear, man, those odds makers out in Vegas know what they're doing. Look, they said they were a 7-point favorite. They won 24-17. Well, that's not kind of what it's all about. But again, 30 plus years, every college football game threw it into the system, into the computer, and it came back and said less than 2% of the time. So when I hear that, I'm like, am I really going to seriously be concerned with a 1.5-point line move? I'm not. Now, they could go out and lose by 9, and I lose my bet. Football gods get back at me for saying this on the show tonight. But the bottom line is, I think the Mountaineers are the way to go here. They've got one of the top offensive lines in the entire Big 12. You got White, who should, come close, if not get over that 1,000-yard mark rushing wise. Ben Cutter's back at linebacker. That defense got pressure on quarterbacks in 2023, as well as just about anybody in the Big 12 and in college football. And then you look at Penn State, they're inexperienced up front on offense. So you got strength for West Virginia up front on defense, weakness for Penn State to a certain extent up front on offense. Again, week 1, I'm talking about offensive lines. I didn't like the conservative play calling for Penn State last season. I think they got some work to do when it comes to that. It cost them a little bit last year. And I know they've got outstanding spread numbers over the last several years when they're facing non-conference opposition. I know Franklin has some outstanding non-conference against the spread numbers along the way too, but I think West Virginia is going to hang this number and give them a real tight game. I think this is a game that comes down to a field goal by the time it's said and done.
Wow. And you said you have money on West Virginia on this one, correct?
Yeah, I do have West Virginia. I got the 10. I still think they're worth a play at 8.5.
Is it good to jump on for newbies or even experienced bettors? Is it good to jump on early, or good to jump on late, or just kind of know where your comfort level is?
Really is the comfort level, that last choice. For me, the Golden Nugget started they call it the college football game of the year lines about 12 years ago, the Golden Nugget in Vegas, and they would put up about 100 games in June, like June 1st. And we'd all go down there and we'd have our money and be ready to go. And every time I walked out of there with 4 bets, maybe 5, and my friends are walking out of there with 25 bets, and it's just because I want to, especially now, today's game, transfer portal. I mean, my gosh, you shouldn't be making bets in June. I don't care what anybody says. But as far as like betting August 1st, as opposed to August 25th on August 31st games, I think it's all about comfort level. I've been in this business and doing this so long, my entire life, but professionally for about 35 years. And when you're in it that long, and I'll say this about anybody who's in it that long, you're going to get to that point where you know where the line is going to move 85% of the games. Doesn't mean you're going to come close to winning that amount, but you know where the line's going to go. That's why I jumped on West Virginia plus 10. I knew the sharp money would come in. I knew this number would move down, and it did by 1.5.
Got a question, Rob?
Scott, yeah. So this is maybe the 3rd or 4th time when you were talking about West Virginia and Penn State, I guess. This is like the 3rd or 4th time tonight you've commented on the experience that a team has up front on the offensive line. I'm an O-lineman. That sticks out to me. I mean, when you're looking at these teams and you're doing these evaluations when it comes to a number standpoint, what games are you going to put money on? It sounds like there's a lot that goes into the offensive line in terms of how experienced a team is up front.
Oh, it is. I mean, for many, many years, what I did, and I still do to a certain extent, although running hasn't meant as much now as it did 20 years ago, but I used to look for a new coach, new left tackle and or new center, new quarterback, new running back. And that's where I started. And I'm not playing on that team. I'm either playing against them or passing. And that's where my week 1 handicapping, even week 2 handicapping, centered around for many, many years. When the running game became a little bit less important in the college football game, I still wanted, if you got 2 out of 3 interior linemen on offense that are brand new, that have no starts, or maybe 1 or 2, center and a left tackle, and you got a quarterback who might be new, boy, I'm looking to play against that team or stay away from their game. I'm not going to play on that team until I see that they've got some chemistry.
Yeah, but even if I'm looking at the passing game, if I'm looking at an offensive line, the first 2 spots I look on the offensive line when it comes to pass blocking, center, left tackle. Same thing you just said about the run game.
Exactly. No, I agree with passing game too. I mean, you got to look at the left tackle. You got to look at the center. By the way, the Steelers are going under this year. They lost their center.
All right, our last game of the evening, it's going to be UTEP at Nebraska. Dylan Raiola, just the second true freshman to start the very first game of his career. They take on the UTEP Miners. You got a new coach, basically a new running game, new receiving core, lots of new faces on defense. Huskers almost a 28-point favorite, 27.5. Over under at 49.5. Scott, I know you watched the podcast that Rob and I did last night. We think Nebraska put up 38 to 45 points. Your thoughts on our prediction and Nebraska covering?
Yeah, the line is basically saying with that total 38 to 10. That's about what the line is saying right now with the total. I watched it. It was funny because I watched it a couple of hours ago, and there was some intriguing things that you guys said, and I thought, I got to go back and look at when the last time UTEP was getting a ton of points like this. Now, it's not a good program. We all know that. This is the biggest or the most amount of points they've received since September 3rd, 2022. They were a 31-point dog at Oklahoma. The Sooners won 45-13. They got their backers a 1-point cover. Before that, it was another 2 years earlier, September 12th, 2020, COVID year. They were plus 45 at Texas, and they lost 59-3. So they're 0-2 over the last 4 years when getting, roughly 4 touchdowns or more. And as far as I'm concerned, listen, I think this was a great hire. Walden going to UTEP. It's going to be an up-tempo offense. It's going to be 6 or 7 seconds into the play clock. He wants to snap the ball. Don't know if he's going to be able to do it in his first game with his new team, with the players he has. But this is a really good hire. And I predict that this isn't a bad thing like we did with the Wisconsin coach a couple years ago. I predict that Walden's not going to be there 4 or 5 years from now, but it's going to be because of his success. I think he's a really good hire with this team after coming over from Austin Peay. I like the receivers for UTEP. They're not bad at all. I like these receivers that are going to be lining up on Saturday. The problem is that they just don't have it in the lines and the trenches to battle Nebraska. And I'm talking about UTEP's offense. I think Nebraska is going to do some damage up front with that D line. And I don't think UTEP is going to be able to consistently move the football. So I think it's a really good number. It hasn't moved, by the way. And if you want to know how Nebraska's done as a big favorite, it isn't good. I don't think I wrote it down here. I was just checking out a few minutes ago, and it's not good. It's you're about 67% going against Nebraska as a big favorite over the last several years. But I'm going to say Nebraska wins 40-10. It won't be a bet for me. I'll be rooting for the Big Red, but I think 40-10 is a pretty good final score prediction.
Rob, did you disappear on us?
Yeah, we lost him, I think.
I think we lost Rob. All right, I'm gonna remove Rob, and we do have a phone call at 402-543-5556. Let's go to the phones. That's where Mike in North Carolina is. Mike, welcome to Behind the Point Spread with Scott Spreitzer. What's up?
Hey, Travis. Hey, Scott. Scott, I just wanted to get your opinion on the Minnesota and North Carolina game tomorrow. I know both teams got new quarterbacks. I think the Minnesota running back is out, and I think that's why that line moved. I'm thinking, but I see with Mac Brown down there, I see North Carolina's got a lot more talent than Minnesota does. And I look at like these Big Ten North teams, like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. Every year it seems like their opening games, they struggle. Even if they win, it looks ugly. You know, and even Nebraska last year. And the only reason Nebraska lost because they turned the ball over and they stunk up the field. They should have won that game last year. You know, I know PJ Fleck's a good coach, but I think North Carolina wins by double digits. I was going to get your take on it.
Yeah, Carolina lost, a lot of offensive talent from last year, but I think they have more imagination, and that's not a shot at PJ Fleck. You know what you're going to get out of PJ? It's going to be let's run the football with the occasional long pass. I was grabbing my phone here because I was looking up to see what the latest is on Darius Taylor, the running back who you mentioned might be out. He's listed as questionable, the latest update with the leg injury. And so is Daniel Jackson, a wide receiver, also listed as questionable for the Gophers. Right now, I'm going to say most of the shops, probably 70% of them have North Carolina laying 2. I'm not going to play this game. If I had to play this game, I'd back the heels. I think too many people are scared of what they lost offensively last year. And I like PJ Fleck as a coach. I think they're pretty good at the fundamentals. They know who they are. They certainly they're like, to me, like the Steelers of old, the Islanders of the 80s. If anybody out there is that old, they know who they are. They know what they want to do under PJ Fleck. And they know if they keep playing the way they do and don't turn the ball over and make dumb mistakes, they're going to win more games than they lose. But I'm telling you what, if the running back, again, he's listed as questionable. If he can't go, I think it's going to be a tough sledding for Minnesota. Not that Carolina is going to blow them off the field, but I think they can win this game by about a touchdown. And again, they're laying 2 right now. So a lean on North Carolina.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the phone call, man.
Yep.
So, Scott, you may not have this, but it pertains to Nebraska. It's from Marty. He says, how long has it been since Nebraska has been favored by that much, 27.5?
If you can give me a second.
Georgia Southern.
Georgia Southern. Yeah. I mean, there you go.
Sorry, I couldn't help it.
No, I mean, yeah,
I
want to see what they were at any point since Georgia Southern. Oh my God, guys. Real quick, I got to tell you, I was sitting in, for some reason my notes aren't, here we go. I was sitting in VSiN Studios at the Circa Hotel that Saturday night with a buddy of mine who went to Purdue, and we're doing the show. We're doing an NFL show. We got 20 TVs in front of us in the studio, and I'm just sitting there dying. I am dying. I'm so fed up with Nebraska watching that game, and he's ribbing me left and right. He thinks it's the funniest thing in the world because he's a Boilermaker, blah, blah, blah. Then I reminded him, how many national titles have you won since I've been alive? And things evened out. But I'm looking, 29 against North Dakota the week before they lost to Georgia Southern. And they had some problems with North Dakota, too, in that game, even though they won by 21. They didn't cover.
What year was that, 19?
That would have been 2 years ago, right?
Oh, 2 years ago?
That's 22.
Yeah, that was 22. The last
that was
few games
basically
of Scott Frost.
Wow.
Yeah, Casey Thompson had basically had a desperation pass out of the end zone that kept Nebraska, kept them from basically losing that game, in my opinion.
Right.
Jason has one more comment. He says, thanks, Scott. As a Steelers fan, I didn't need that reminder. Consecutive 500 and above is done. So
I did say they just named Russell Wilson as the starting quarterback going into the season.
See, I get a hard time. Okay, I used to be a big Russ fan at NC State, at Wisconsin, and then, of course, in the best years with Pete Carroll. But
he was great in Seattle.
What's that?
He was great in Seattle.
Yes, and he dropped off the cliff. I mean, have you ever seen a quarterback that their talent and their skill drops? I mean, it was horrible at Denver. And I blame the coach. It was a Hackett because he never played him in the preseason that first year. New team, new offense for everybody, new offense and location for Russ. It wasn't that. We found out last year under a very good coach, it wasn't that. So anyway, with Pittsburgh, listen, they got so many. That offensive line is basically stunk. And I apologize to Steeler fans for about 6 years. Now they lose their starter in fall camp up front at center. You got Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, all the God-given talent in the world. The guy can't read a defense, and he pulls the ball down too quick when the pocket gets a little tight. I think, listen, Mike Tomlin can make a whole lot of money doing what we're doing, talking about games for networks. He can get another coaching job. He's been a fantastic coach. I think this is it for Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh.
Wow. I mean, think about it. Since Rob and I have been alive, and really, I think you as well, Scott, the Steelers have only had 3 head coaches, Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin. That's crazy to think that only 3 coaches with one NFL team for as long as we've been alive.
They've known their identity. And I got to tell you right now, if I'm a Steeler fan, I'm a fan of no team. I'm a fan of the point spread. But if I'm a Steeler fan, I would rather have Kenny Pickett, who's in Philly now, as a backup than Russ or Justin Fields.
Hey, got this coming in for you. What do you think about Coach Prime and the Buffs at 9.5 versus North Dakota State? That game's going to be on Thursday night. I tell you, Colorado's a mess. I wanted Coach Prime to succeed. He's now. I just look at him what he did with Sean Keeler with the Denver Post, and it's a shit show in Boulder. It really is.
They as much as Deion drives me nuts, they've still got some freak athletes on that team. They really do.
I was thinking about jumping on the Bison here, and I watched that Montana State New Mexico game. Montana State, top 5 or 6 FCS program, good season after good season, and they're looking like they're going to go down to defeat at New Mexico, a very bad FBS program right now. They end up winning 35-31 late, extremely late in that game. They got the win, and they were laying double digits. They were like 13, 14-point favorites. Never, ever came close to challenging that point spread. That scares me because North Dakota State's a great football program, as we all know. And I'm telling you what, right now, I'd fire if I'm Deion Sanders. I'm not worried about the press. I agree with you, Travis. I was rooting for him until that. If I'm Deion Sanders, I want to know who scheduled this game. I mean, why in the world are you scheduling North Dakota State as your season opener? That's nuts. You could lose. If you win, well, you're supposed to. They're FCS. If you lose, your season's done as far as any kind of talk for a potential top 12 playoff appearance. But the thing about it is I saw Montana State struggle badly with New Mexico, a bad football team. And what Rob just mentioned, Colorado's got enough skill to where if North Dakota State doesn't play a near perfect game, this could turn into an ugly game where Colorado's able to win by 17, 20 points because of the skill position.
Hey, Scott, I got to point out here. You talked about Montana State struggling with New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Montana State's is the FCS team,
right? Well, but they're top 6 and everybody bet them last week. They were third. How about that, Rob? When you were playing, I don't care who was involved as far as the FBS team. When you were in your playing career in college, can you imagine an FCS team being a 14-point road favorite over an FBS football team? That was the case last week.
The thing that cracks me up about is, wait, the FCS team only eked out a win over the
Yeah, it does sound funny.
Yeah, it does very much so. Hey, if you guys want to work with Scott Spreitzer during the season, he is the man to go to. Text the word Doc to the number 29022 and get a free $60 trial of the premium member picks from Scott, or visit docsports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left side of the website. Any parting shots, guys? Anything else you want to bring up before we let you go? I know, Scott, we try to keep this at a half hour. We're never going to keep the show at a half hour. It's just never going to happen. But 45
Imagine
minutes.
when we start cracking the beers.
Well, he already has. I'm on a weight loss program. I can't drink this. And Rob, by the way, you're right. I didn't gain any weight drinking that beer. I lost 2.5 pounds last week. So those
you
6
drank
ounces
like
you gave me.
1 ounce.
I drank like 6 ounces, and it's the first beer I've had since
1
April.
ounce, dude. And then you poured like 8 ounces into the cup after I poured you a 1 ounce.
I got to ask,
dude,
can you
Scott,
maintain this when you go back to a normal, diet and you want to have a couple of beers? Can you maintain, stay within 5-8 pounds of the weight that you're at now? Is it possible? That's my biggest question when it comes to these diet programs.
15 years ago, I left television. I went to MCL Construction to work. I was at about 200 then. I ballooned up to, I think my top weight was about 252, and at 5'11", that's not healthy. I'm back down to 206. So I want to get to 200 because I feel I can maintain 200. I'm hoping. Now, I'm on a program. Once I hit 200, I'll go into that maintenance program, and I'll be on that at least till May that I know of. So hopefully I can maintain, Scott. I mean, just for my overall health, I think that's better. My wife's buying me new clothes now. Rob, she went to TJ Maxx. All right, she went to TJ Maxx and got me some new pants. Well, I went to work.
TJ Maxx.
I went to work yesterday, and I had these slacks on. And I swear to God, they were so big, they were hanging off of me. She's like, I'm going to go get you pants. You look ridiculous. People at work just are not nice enough to tell you look stupid. So she went and got me some new pants. So I've got a pair of new pants to wear.
You're lucky because my wife would probably be online buying from Temu. So there you go.
Temu, they're just harvesting all your data. They're trying to get to you. Oh my goodness!
Well, that's if I can get down to 215 or 210, I'll be absolutely thrilled.
All right, good start to the season.
The last time you weighed
No, go ahead.
15.
Go ahead.
I was in maybe like 9th grade.
Wow, real world problems for you. Yeah, but you're also 6'5".
I got spreadability.
Oh,
it's a thing.
You are
spreadability ought to be a gambling term.
Spreadability. We're making it up as we go along.
I'm going to start when a team goes on a run against the spread. I'm going to call it spreadability.
I actually did have a question. So I mean, this is kind of a hindsight thing for Scott. So the Florida State Georgia Tech game, who did you have there?
I didn't. I passed. I didn't play a single week 0 game, Rob. I did a free video. A duo free video where I gave out the Montana State game under. It went over. And then I gave out Nevada plus the points over SMU, and that one cashed. And I ended up not making any plays last week. It was only, 5 or 6 games. And old mentor of mine who's now in his 80s, who's a professional gambler since he was in his 40s. Guy's got a law degree. He's super smart. Grammar thrown out the window when he talked about first week games. He goes, nobody knows nothing about nothing. And I've never forgotten those words. And so did stay out of those games.
Hey,
if you were going to pick one there, did you have a pick?
In that game, I would have actually laid it with Florida State after they dropped from 13.5 down to 10.
Okay.
And there was a ton of people. I mean, it was like 70% of the bets, at least on Tech. And I don't like to be on the popular side as much as I possibly can stay away from that. And saw a couple of play action early on where I thought, this is what they did with Uiagalelei up at Oregon State. He had success. And then they just started doing these dink and dumps. And, and that was it. They were done.
Just to let everybody know, next week we're going to kick it back up. We'll have the regular 4 college football games, but to make this show go even longer, we're going to sprinkle in a couple of NFL games as well. So we know the NFL is big with a lot of people, so we'll be bringing in some NFL games. So Scott and Rob, thanks for your time on a Wednesday night. I had fun. What a way to kick off the season, right?
Good stuff, man. Thanks, guys.
Dude, appreciate it, guys.
Good as always. It's Behind the Points. And by the way, subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow Dr. Rob on Twitter. I guess now X. Somebody ripped me on YouTube saying it's not Twitter anymore. It's X. I know that.
It's still Twitter.
It's Twitter. It's Twitter.
No one calls it X. No one.
Follow Scott on Twitter or X at Scott Wins. So you can follow me at Travis Creates. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. For Scott Spreitzer, Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We will see you next week on Behind the Point Spread.